Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Mean Girls of Morgantown Part 5. Today we're going to be talking about the tragic life of Skylar Ness. Even though the police would label Skylar as a runaway and really weren't doing more than what the Nesses had wanted in trying to find their daughter, the FBI would become involved in the investigation a whole 24 hours after the disappearance of Skylar Ness. As while they were going through another investigation, they would say that Skylar's case would be very similar to a case that they were involving a child that had gone missing. And they had went down to Morgantown, West Virginia to investigate the case to see if there not only were similarities, but to see if the case that they were originally investigating was connected to the case of Skylar Ness. But inevitably, the FBI, while aiding the police and solving the investigation of Skylar Ness, would find that even though the similarities of the cases were very, very close and similar, they weren't connected in any way. But the police weren't completely giving up on Skylar Ness, and even though they would label her a runaway, they would place an agent or a police officer on the investigation, and that would be Jessica Colbank. And the reason they would assign Jessica Colbank the case is that during her time on the force, she had accumulated a reputation as being someone that could help find teenagers and children fairly fast. And the FBI would join Jessica Colbank in interviewing certain people that they thought that knew more than they had let on. More specifically, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Shove. Now, the first person that Jessica Colbank and the FBI would approach would be Sheila Eddy, and she would be home on this particular day. And as they knocked on the door and they would go inside, they would find Sheila Eddy in some sort of kind of makeshift room or garage where she would have like these chairs set up around a television set, and was kind of sitting around, just kind of casually lounging around, watching the updates on the case on Skylar Ness. And Jessica Colbank and the FBI took notice of this and were really kind of set back that Sheila Eddy really didn't show any other sign other than just casually sitting around and watching these news reports. And Jessica Colbank would tell the FBI agent that she was kind of thrown off, that this is supposed to be Skylar Ness's best friend, and she's not distraught, she's not upset, she's not acting more concerning. And they would proceed and say they would just go forward with asking Sheila about any information that she might have. So Jessica Colbank would start interviewing Sheila Eddy at the home and would begin asking questions about the whereabouts or what led up during the night that Skylar Ness went missing. And Sheila Eddy would tell Jessica Colbank and the FBI the same exact story that she had told the police when they first approached her, that she had texted Skylar Ness that night and had picked her up around 11 and had dropped her off around 11:45. And this would raise more questions for Jessica Colbank concerning that night in question. Jessica Colbank would ask Sheila, well, if you had picked up Skylar around her house, why couldn't you drop her off at her house? This just doesn't make sense. And at first, Sheila would say that Skylar just did not want to be dropped off at her house because she didn't want to wake her parents up. She was too scared of waking her parents up. And when Jessica Colbank would question her more about it, Sheila would change her story, and it went from Skylar had instructed her to drop her off, and now it had changed the story to, well, me and Skylar had gotten a fight and she jumped out of the car. So once Sheila would change her story from dropping her off because she was instructed to Skylar jumping out of the car because her and Sheila had gotten into an argument, Jessica Colbank would ask another question. Well, why haven't you been online? And Jessica Colbank would inform Sheila that while this was going on, Dave and Mary Ness had not only created pages on Facebook, but they had also made pages on Twitter as a way to reaching out to people that could possibly know anything about finding their daughter. And Jessica Colbank would also inform Sheila that, every single one at your school is on these pages and is saying something, asking for updates about Skylar. And would even inform her, everybody seems to be concerned about finding this girl except for you, and you're supposed to be her best friend. Sheila would ultimately respond to Jessica Colbank's question by saying that she had not been online or asked questions about the Facebook post, that she was just too distraught to go on Facebook or too distraught to go on Twitter to ask about Skylar Ness. Now keep in mind you, she had been jumping on these social media platforms to talk to other friends about other things, but was not showing any interest in finding Skylar Ness. And Jessica Colbank knew this, and quickly when Sheila would tell Jessica this, that Jessica Colbank would just say that she was full of BS and would not believe her story whatsoever. And it's at this point, after Jessica Colbank would accuse Sheila Eddy of lying, that Sheila would just begin crying. And when Sheila began crying in the room during these questionings, it's at this point that Sheila's mom would overhear Sheila crying, and she would come barging in and close the entire investigation down. She would say that her daughter was not going to answer any more questions and wasn't going to be bullied by a police officer and an FBI agent. So they quickly had to leave the premises. But they figured, even though Sheila Eddy was a bust, they had one other person to investigate, and that was Rachel Shove. Since Sheila Eddy was a bust because of her emotional breakdown at the house, they would just go to the next person of interest, which would be Rachel Shove. Now, at the time when they wanted to investigate Rachel Shove, she was already at a church camp. And they would find this out when they would go to her house, and her mother Patricia would tell the police that she was in church camp. And so Jessica Colbank would decide to give Rachel a call while she was at camp. And they would ask Rachel, did you know that your friend Skylar Ness has been missing for the last couple of days? And Rachel would tell the police and the investigator that she had no idea that Skylar Ness was missing. And this also would throw out a red flag to Jessica Colbank, as she knew that Rachel Shove was another really close friend of Skylar Ness, and knew that Sheila Eddy was very close, and Sheila had been keeping updates on the investigation and everything. So Sheila knew about the disappearance of Skylar and had known that there was no way Rachel could not have known that her friend was missing. So Jessica Colbank would ask Rachel when she returned home from the camp if she didn't mind coming down to the station to ask a few questions. And Rachel would tell them as soon as she got home that she would come down to the station and ask any questions that they had. But not only would Rachel not inform the police when she would return home from camp, she wouldn't even come to the station at all, to the point that Jessica Colbank and the FBI agent would have to track her down at her mom's house. And during this questioning, they would have a little bit more red flags when it came to Rachel Shove. And when they asked her in question about the night of her disappearance, Rachel would give almost a direct, exact answer to what Sheila Eddy had told the police. And everything would seem normal. That is until Jessica Colbank would start asking questions about exactly where they drove during the night in question. And where they would find red flags is where Rachel was telling Jessica Colbank where they went didn't line up to what Sheila Eddy had told the police where they had drove. And when they would question her more about exactly where she had went, they would backtrack it and look at the roads that she said that they went on, and they realized the roads that she had named down were not drivable roads, and they were more of a walking type of sidewalk type area. And they would inform Rachel about this, to where Rachel would just say, well, if you have any questions, just ask Sheila Eddy. But Jessica Colbank and the FBI would leave this investigation with more questions than answers. But they knew one thing was for certain, that Sheila and Rachel were lying through their teeth.